Texas lost to Kansas in football, Texas lost to Kansas in football, and Texas Longhorns lost a game of football to the Kansas Jayhawks. All this and more on College Crossfire. All this and more on College Crossfire. Let's throw it to the intro.
I just go straight to...
All right. Well, everyone, welcome to College Crossfire. I'm your host, Drew Jacob. Let's make the rounds. We've got Matt on first base, going for a second win in a row. Matt? Matt, they're not liking you. They're not feeling you. What's going on?
I mean, hey, haters gonna hate. You couldn't win last week. It's tough. I'm kind of more mad that my intro video didn't go up, but I'm happy to be here.
Matt is the bad boy of TSTV Sports, everybody.
We're going to go back to back.
On second base, we've got Zach. Zach, happy to have you on.
Happy to be here. Hopefully I have some beginner's luck. You never know.
Beginner's luck. Let's see. Well, Matt was talking about throwing the game, so you might have gotten your beginner's luck already. And on third, we've got Clark. Clark, how you doing?
Good.
Clark makes his triumphant return to TSTV, everybody. Let's get our TSTV Crossfire, everybody. Let's get back into it. Kansas. As I said earlier, the Texas Longhorns lost to the University of Kansas Jayhawks in Austin last Saturday night. For the first time in program history, mind you. Kansas. Are you sure this wasn't a basketball game? No, okay. Well, in any case, the team is currently sitting at 4-6 with their first 5-game losing streak since the 1950s and with bowl eligibility looking unlikely at best. The only questions coming to mind are, has Texas truly finally hit rock bottom, and is this the worst-case scenario for how the start of Sark's tenure could have turned out? And for this one, we're going to start with Matt.
Is Texas football bad? Yes. Is this rock bottom? No.
Oh.
To me, in my opinion, rock bottom is 0-12, 1-11. They at least have 4 wins. They beat Texas Tech, they're bowl eligible. They beat Louisiana. Louisiana's, I believe, 9-1, something like that. So they're a good team. They are bad, though. Texas is bad. But as I said last week, a lot of this falls on lack of leadership from the players in the locker room and just the players in general, because all these guys are all Herman's guys. Sark and Herman had different play call and different schemes. So the guys that are on the team right now aren't necessarily the guys that fix Sark's game plan. So once Sark's guys come in, I think maybe the tides would turn for Texas a little bit. But the way you got to look at it is Texas fans, they're board of regions, everybody's too quick to fire the coach. They don't give the team the time to develop and grow. You look at Ohio State, Georgia, Bama, they're all powerhouses. Do they fire their coach every 3 years? No. I think Texas finally needs to give a coach some time, because Texas has been bad ever since 2010 when Mac Brown went 5-7, and ever since then, it's been a coaching carousel. They haven't had time to build a good team, build a good program. So I think right now they're bad. It's not rock bottom. They'll hopefully rebound in the future.
Matt, interesting take. I got to say, rock bottom in general, no, you're right, teams go 0-12. That being said, though, in regards to giving coaches enough time, this is the coach at Kansas, this is also his first year. I think that just needs to get noted. But anyway, Zach, moving on to you next.
I'm going to go ahead and disagree. I think that for Texas, this is rock bottom. At 4-6, losing to Kansas for the first time at home since...
First time in Austin ever.
First time ever. So that's really crazy to think about. And losing Bijan Robinson, now your star player, sitting at 4-6, I don't even think Texas can win the rest of their schedule. I think they're going to go 4-8 and not be bowl eligible. And it's just sad to see. And I don't think the locker room's even in Sark's favor. I feel like there's a lot of players that aren't really bought into his game plan yet and his philosophy yet. So I feel like this year is just down the toilet. It's rock bottom.
Well, absolutely. If they're capable of losing a home game to Kansas, I think they're capable of losing to anybody. So it's very probable they go 4-8. But Clark, we're going to round out the question with you.
This is like the part in Christmas Vacation where Clark Griswold realizes he doesn't have enough money for the pool, and then he just starts on that rant. That's what Texas football is right now. And it's one of those things where it's been a vicious cycle, and I think it is kind of a point that's actually not below rock bottom, but it's pretty close to it if we're talking about rock bottom. Not because they just lost to Kansas, but they did it again because they lost 5 years ago to Charlie Strong. We all know what happened after that. But it's one of those things where people have been talking about Texas is going to be back one day. Texas is going to be back one day, but we're hearing the same excuses over and over again. Yeah, some of it is true that some of the players might not buy into Sark, but it's not like these guys are completely talentless. Bijan Robinson is a Sark guy. DeMarvion Overshown. Oh, Bijan Robinson is a Tom Herman guy. Sorry about that. DeMarvion Overshown is a Tom Herman guy. So Sark doesn't really have an excuse there because those players were already developed and you can win with. And really, it's been a tale of two teams this season. They were 4-1. At one point, ESPN was actually talking about Texas possibly being a college football playoff sleeper. They lose to OU. We know what happens. And it's just one of those things. Texas just doesn't seem to have the mystique that other programs have. And I think that Texas really needs to look at what they're emphasizing within the program. And this kind of goes back to some of the athletics revenue spending. It's kind of interesting because if you look at Ohio State, they spend much more on scholarships and other things, and Texas doesn't spend near the amount of money. I think Ohio State's at $20 million right now. Texas is somewhere at $11 million. So if they start changing that, that's when the program can go in the right direction. But right now, it's just not a first-class program. And when you think of Texas, you don't think of mystique, you think of beans.
Absolutely. You know, when you look at the money spent versus elite programs like Ohio State, when you look at kind of the relative lack of talent, none of these things are excuses for losing to Kansas. You know, that can explain why you don't win the Big 12, but we're talking about an absolute bottom feeder in the Power 5 here, and you've lost to them twice in 5 years. So, Clark, for the thirdness for your answer, I'm going to give you the 3 on this one, Zach the 2, and Matt the 1. Overall, though, prognosis is looking bad. To cap off a difficult Saturday of college sports, the Texas Longhorns men's basketball team sustained a 12-point loss to number 1 Gonzaga last Saturday. That margin may not sound so bad, but anyone who watched the game live would know that the Longhorns pretty much got dog-walked. Still, at least this result came at the hands of the consensus number 1 team, unlike certain programs at the school. In any case, I'm wondering if this win tells us more about Texas or Gonzaga. Were the Horns overrated, or are the Bulldogs just that good? Zach, we're starting with you on this one.
I'm going to go ahead and say that the Bulldogs are just that good. Texas is still a new team. Texas is not underrated. Texas went down to number 8 now, so number 8's a pretty good spot. Texas is still learning who they are and who is going to be their scorers and who's going to be their guy. Dylan DeSue, he's out still, and he led the SEC in rebounds last year, and that's something that Texas didn't do very well against Gonzaga because they just got out-rebounded completely. And Drew Timme just went off for a career night. You can't really say much about that. He was just on his stuff, and Texas just got bullied.
Yeah, absolutely. Man played like a superstar, and when you run into these top-tier teams, that's just going to happen. So anyway, Clark, on to you next.
Yeah, I'm going to have to kind of echo what Zach said just because, look, this Gonzaga team was 1 win away last year from not just being the national champion, but being an undefeated team. And they have most of their core returning with Drew Timme and Chet Holmgren coming in. Chet Holmgren could be a number 1 pick in this year's NBA draft, so they're a super talented team. And I think it was good for Texas to go out and lose this game, actually, because let's be honest here. If you have 5 transfer players, they're not really going to know how to play together just yet, and they need to develop a sense of chemistry, especially when it's kind of their first year together and under a new coach. So now they know, oh, this is the level that's required to be a Final Four team or even a national championship team possibly. And Drew Timme going off, it's just one of those things you can't stop. And to be honest, Texas's bigs don't really match up well with him because Trey Mitchell and Christian Bishop are more finesse bigs. They like to go out and shoot. They're not guys who like to pound down low like Timme does. So I think it was just kind of all those factors culminating together, and that's why we saw them lose to Gonzaga. But they played much better in the second half, so that's a positive.
Absolutely. You need to find a middle ground between, cherishing moral victories too much and also getting too upset with the team over one game. This is Gonzaga we're talking about, and they have a lot of playmakers. It looks like Timmy's even taken a step forward this year, which is scary for the rest of the league. Matt, going to round this one out with you.
Well, obviously you play Gonzaga, number 1 team in the country. They haven't lost a home game in over 2 years. So going into that, the biggest game ever in that arena, Gonzaga obviously had everything in their favors, and Drew Timme was, some were saying, the frontrunner for the award for the most outstanding player for college basketball. But in terms of Texas, I think 5, preseason rankings, I've never been a fan of preseason rankings. I feel like they're just objectified by the writers, and you haven't seen a team play that year. So I think they were a little overrated, only due to the fact that they're mostly transfer players, as Clark mentioned. The chemistry is not there. Obviously, once these guys start having the chemistry, they'll be a better team, and that's when they'll be a top 5 team. But having this loss out of the way now, as Clark said, will show them what they need to work on. Obviously, their big problem is in the paint. They can't rebound that good. They're getting bullied by Drew Timme in the paint. So I think right now, they're a little overrated, but let them mesh a little bit through non-conference play and then through conference play, and I think by the end of the season, they'll be a top 5 team and they'll be rated correctly.
I think it's interesting you've all brought up the rebounding. After the New Orleans game Texas played, people noticed that they didn't dominate the boards quite like you would expect, and I think after their first game of the year, that is going to be a theme throughout the year, it looks like. They're going to have to get it cleaned up. In any case, I think we can all agree it is Gonzaga we're talking about here. So, that being said, Zach, you're going to be getting the 3, Clark, the 2, and Matt, the 1. Moving on to a beacon of light in an otherwise hopeless world, the number 12 ranked Texas women's basketball team is riding high after their shocking win over the formerly number 3 Stanford Cardinal. Everything seems to be going right for the team this season as they've handled business against lesser opponents and proved they belong on the court when they played real contenders like Stanford. My question is this: how excited should fans be for this year's Texas women's basketball team, and are they looking to exceed expectations? Clark, on to you first.
Or after this video gets out, I want to see, look at the smile on my face. Texas fans, this is the smile you should definitely have, because we knew the team was going to be good this year, but we didn't know how good because they lost Charlie Collier, which was a huge loss, so you kind of questioned their size, particularly inside, and also Charlie was a pretty decent shooter. But now it looks like they've gotten even better with their three-point shooting this year, and they're able to accommodate for that offensively. And we saw it down the stretch with Aaliyah Martharo knocking down those big threes. And another player who's looked really impressive so far is Rory Harmon. Her ball handling ability is incredible. And what all of this means is that these players are actually ahead of the curve in terms of their development. That's rare for a freshman, where just to come in day one and say, hey, I had the confidence, let's go out there and beat Stanford. I think Texas could make a big run in the NCAA tournament this year, and it would not surprise me if Baylor has a little bit of trouble against the Longhorns for the first time in a long time.
I could see it. You know, we were talking about this at the beginning of the year. You can't replace Collier, especially now. There's no one player on the roster, perhaps in all of the league, who's going to replace Collier. But you know, you have this sort of ensemble cast of characters here who can kind of play different roles, and overall, the team doesn't have to miss too much of a step. It's looking like that might be just what we get. Matt, on to you next.
Yeah, you definitely want to be excited about this team because first game of the season, you win by almost 100. Second game, you beat the reigning champs on the road. On their ring night, you spoiled that whole night for them. And then today, you beat down on Southern Missouri University. But that was a game where your starters really didn't play that much. Audrey Warren came in garbage time. This was a game where the backups played. But Texas women's basketball, there's a very well-rounded team. Rory Harmon, Aaliyah Martharo, you have good freshmen, you got good transfers. And people thought losing Charlie Collier, Texas would lose their whole identity. But actually, I think it was the opposite, because when you had Charlie Collier, the opponents know, stop Charlie Collier, you stop Texas. But now that she's gone, Texas, their scoring has opened up. You had 5 players in double digits today. You have multiple players averaging double digits. They're a good team that could shoot. They're good on the boards. Their only issue is free throws. I think once they clean up the free throws, they'll be a truly elite team.
Absolutely, you got to clean up the little things, but you're right. You know, there is no one answer for stopping Texas anymore. It's being that Collier's gone and there's no one player they're sort of insisting on or demanding production from as much. Also, did not know that it was Stanford's ring night. I think that's an incredible fact. Zach, on to you next.
Yeah, I think the sky's the limit for this women's team. Transfer Aaliyah Martharo from Mississippi State, averaging about 18 points already. Her shooting is impacting this team very well. And freshman Rory Harmon, the same 2 players that they're talking about, because they're the 2 best players right now. Rory Harmon's shooting amazing. Her ball handling is amazing. And Vic Schaefer, now, this is his team. 9 out of the 13 players on the roster are now players that he has recruited. So now this team is something that he can now form in his second year at Texas.
So, you know, now that he's got you know, his players in, he's sort of taken some ownership of the team, and you can really start moving forward and building something here. I absolutely would agree. That being said, Matt, I'm going to give you the 3 on this one, Clark the 2, and Zach the 1. When we come back, we'll be talking Big 12 football and professional shooty hoops. You won't want to miss it. back to College Crossfire. Before we get started, let's take a look at the scoreboard. Leading the show, we've got Clark with 7 points. Coming in close at second, we've got Zach with 6, and bringing up the rear right behind him, we've got Matt with 5. All right, let's jump back into it. With just 2 weeks left of regular season play in the Big 12, a 3-horse race to fill 2 spots in the conference championship game is heating up. Now, technically, it's a 4-team race in the sense that Iowa State is not mathematically eliminated, but the show's not a charity. Now, perennial top dog Oklahoma is in the thick of it with Oklahoma State and Baylor, with Oklahoma State and Baylor, and the latter having a chance to knock out Oklahoma State having a chance to knock OU out of contention when the two meet in Bedlam on the 27th. I've heard that one before. It feels like every year the race is about this tight, and every year it ends the same way, with Oklahoma holding the Big 12 championship up high. Now, with that in mind, I'm not necessarily asking for who the favorite is. I think it goes without saying it's Oklahoma. Rather, I'm asking you to pick the more likely scenario. Cash on the table, betting on the Big 12 champion right now. Would you put your wager on Oklahoma or the field? And on this one, we're starting with Matt.
Definitely not Oklahoma, because throughout the first 9 weeks of the season, they were the biggest pretender in college football. 9-0, you almost lose to Tulane, almost lose to Nebraska, almost lost to Kansas, sure lost to Texas. All these losses, they should have 3 or 4 losses, and they should not be anywhere near the Big 12 title contention. And look at their schedule now. They lose to Baylor last week in that crazy game. I like how they kicked the field goal as an extra you-know-what to them. That was awesome. But the rest of their season, Iowa State, pretty solid team, always played them pretty well. That'll be a tough one. Then Oklahoma State. The real defensive test Oklahoma played for the first time this season was Baylor. Now you're going to play against a good Iowa State defense, a good Oklahoma State defense. I don't think they're going to win both those games. And if you look at the field, I think either Baylor or Oklahoma State is going to have a better chance to win the Big 12 championship, because OU is simply not going to make it to the Big 12 championship.
Look, I would agree. This feels like one of the most vulnerable OU teams we've seen in some time. It's just they have a way about them. And frankly, I think Oklahoma State is just mentally deficient when it comes to playing OU. But I would love for you to be right. Anyway, Zach, on to you next.
Yeah, I'm going to put my money on the field, and I'm going to put my money on the over on any of the games because of the defense. So I think that Oklahoma, just the way that they've played and the way their defense has played lately, I don't think that they can get it done against Oklahoma State. And I think Oklahoma State, and it's going to be Oklahoma State and Baylor in the Big 12 championship, just because, you know, Oklahoma still has a quarterback controversy. The last game, they just had to do the old switcheroo and put in a different quarterback for Caleb Williams, Spencer Rattler finally coming in. I don't think it's going to be one of those Alabama situations where both of them are going to be too successful after each other, but I'm pretty confident in the fact that their defense is terrible, so I'm going to go with the field.
Especially bold take that Oklahoma won't even be making the Big 12 championship game. Would love to see it play out that way, but I'm just not sure. Clark, can end this one with you.
This is a tough pick just because Oklahoma's been so good for so long, but I'm actually going to have to pick the field on this one, and I can't believe I'm saying that. If you told me in August that you'd be saying Oklahoma's not going to make the Big 12 championship game or not win it, I would have called you crazy. But to me this year, what happened was Spencer Rattler struggled at the beginning of the season because the interior of OU's offensive line is really important, and they lost some depth there, and that caused Rattler to experience some pressure, and then he started to regress because of that and lost his confidence. And then you put in Caleb Williams, and I think all of these experts across the country thought, oh, this is the solution they needed. No, he was a Band-Aid on a much bigger cut. And now you're starting to see that defensive coordinators in the Big 12 are pretty smart, especially David Aranda at Baylor, who came from LSU when they won the national championship. Dave Aranda figured out how to stop Lincoln Riley, and I think more coaches are starting to follow suit. Yes, I love Lincoln Riley. Well, don't love Lincoln Riley, obviously, because he beats Texas every year. But Lincoln Riley is one of the best offensive minds, but this is the first time he's been challenged in the Big 12 in probably 4 or 5 years. And I think for that reason, when you consider the dysfunction, the true challenge they faced for a long time, it makes Oklahoma not as good as they were in years past and makes them less of a favorite. Also, there's a lot of talk about that LSU Lincoln Riley rumor. I think there's some weight to it, and there might be a bit of dysfunction where some players are feeling not as trustworthy with Lincoln Riley, possibly.
Interesting. You know, that really can mess with team chemistry. Those rumors start getting into the locker room. Caleb's Williams point is also very, very true. He hasn't quite turned into the Heisman candidate that Kirk Herbstreit said he would upon his second game.
He said that a lot.
He sure did. That being said, maybe it's battered Longhorn syndrome, but I would still personally pick Oklahoma. That being said, solid answers all around. So, Matt, you're going to get the 3 on this one. Clark, the 2. And Zach, the 1. Don't look now, but we're already just about a quarter of the way through the NBA season, which means there's a big enough sample size to start making informed predictions about end-of-the-year awards. In this case, we'll be looking at the freshmen in the league and forecasting who we think is going to take home the Rookie of the Year award. From stars such as Scotty Barnes to Cade Cunningham to Franz Wagner, there's still many candidates out there. So, panelists, let me know who you got. And do your best to get me on the hype train for your player who you think is going to win the NBA's Rookie of the Year award this season. On this one, we're starting with Zach.
You know, I'm going to go with Evan Mobley from USC, who's on the Cavaliers. You know, usually you don't see a big man doing as well coming out of college, already imposing their will on defenses. Just the way that he's already fitting in well with Jared Allen. He's already averaging 16 points, about 8 rebounds a game. And the system that he's in is perfect with the pick and roll game that they play with Colin Sexton and Darius Garland in Cleveland. And who's better to learn than from Texas big man Jared Allen on the pick and roll game? So I think he's in a perfect situation, and he's already playing well. And the Cavs are actually winning games. They're actually a contender in the East. He's not just on any other team that's losing.
Excellent point. Averaging 16 and 8 on a winning team. I think that's got to make him something of a contender. Clark, on to you next.
Man, Evan Mobley, dang it. All right, just kidding. I didn't have Evan Mobley. I had Scotty Barnes, and I think the Raptors were smart with taking him because that was a pick that was panned by everybody. Everybody's like, why'd you take Scotty Barnes? He's a bust. All he can do is play defense. He can't shoot. But what they did is they're smart. They have one of the best development staffs in the NBA with Nick Nurse at head coach, and they looked at him and said, we're going to make you our next Kawhi Leonard. Now, he's not that good just yet, but down the road in a couple of years, if he continues to develop the way he's developing this season, he could turn into that type of player. The knock on him in college was he couldn't shoot. Clearly, the Raptors have worked on that. They've worked on his offensive game, and he's averaging 16 points per game. He had a 25-10 game this year as a Raptors rookie. There are only 2 other players in Raptors history to do that. That's Tracy McGrady and Chris Bosh. Both of those guys had pretty good careers, and I think it's just one of those things. It feels like every year in the draft, there's kind of a high upside guy where he could be a bust, but if you really work with him and you really develop his jump shot, he can turn into a pretty good player, and I think Scotty Barnes is that player. And some people would say Cade Cunningham, but Luka Doncic hype is a lot to live up to, and I don't think he can just meet those expectations, especially with some of the injuries early on.
A lot of weight to put on his shoulders with the Kawhi Leonard comparison, but with how he's played this year and with Toronto's history of player development, absolutely not unwarranted. Matt, on to you next.
So actually, Clark, I'm going to be one of those guys. I'm going to say Cade Cunningham. He obviously missed a few games because of injury, but when he's played, he's looked like the number 1 overall pick. He's been solid. He could shoot. He could rebound. He could pass the rock. He's a good player. He obviously, as a rookie, you have some kinks, and being on the Pistons, not a lot of hope for the team success, but I think he's going to be a very successful NBA player at some point in his career. I think he'll be the favorite to win Rookie of the Year.
Solid pick, absolutely. All around, great job, everybody. But on this one, Clark, I'm going to be giving you the 3, Zach the 2, and Matt the 1. We've got to take another break, but when we come back, it'll be for all the marbles, because up next is Rapid Fire. You won't want to miss it. Welcome back to College Crossfire, and I hope our panel's ready to think on their toes, because it's time for Rapid Fire, which of course means it's anyone's game! capacity crowd tonight. Superman returns. Cam Newton is back on the Carolina Panthers, and the hype is starting to build around the league that this reunion could be exactly what the team needs to mount a late-season playoff push. This got me thinking, panelists, let us know your favorite NFL team and which old player you'd like to have back as they try to make it and push their way into the postseason. Anyone can jump in.
I'm going to go obscure on this one. This is how you know I'm a Denver Broncos fan. I want the Broncos to get not Peyton Manning back, Jake Plummer. Everybody forgets Jake Plummer was the first quarterback to beat Tom Brady in a playoff game in 2005, and he had the Broncos one game away from the Super Bowl. His nickname was Jake the Snake. He was definitely not an elite quarterback, but he was really fun to watch, and he made a bunch of plays. I would love to see him lift up at Lombardi with that big bushy beard he had, and he did that for a sweet reason because Pat Tillman was his best friend, and that was a tribute to him. So I want to see him lift at Lombardi just because I think it would be hilarious. And he beat Patrick Mahomes. That'd be pretty funny.
Interesting pick that a guy who could never really go could still go, but I like it. I like it's outside the box.
I'm going to also go, because I'm a Denver Broncos fan as well, so I'm going to go with an older player, Terrell Davis. I just really wish, as a Broncos fan, we could have seen him play a little more. His career was cut too short from injuries, and in today's NFL, man, he would be scary. He would be scary. I think he would run. I think he would be ahead of King Henry in a lot of categories, and I think he would be definitely an MVP front runner.
TD does fit better in today's game. I like that point. But Matt, on to you.
I'm a Giants fan. Obvious answer would be Eli Manning, but I'm not going with Eli Manning.
Oh.
Our defense is atrocious. Give me LT back, Lawrence Taylor.
All right, you know, it's easy to say Eli, but in terms of what the team actually needs, I think LT is the best pick. And out of all three, I have to go with LT. I think he'd make the biggest difference. So, Matt, you're getting the points on that one. Controversy was stirred up the other day when star NBA player Anthony Davis was ejected from a game due to a call that many in the sports world have deemed bogus. And believe me, fans who feel slighted by the refs have a long memory. Des caught it. So, let me know. What is the worst call you've ever seen committed by an official across all major sports? Anyone can jump in.
Okay, this one's really quick and easy for me. Ejecting Tim Duncan for laughing. I think that was the worst call.
When was it?
And I forgot which season it was, but Tim Duncan was on the bench just laughing at a call that the official made, and he got ejected for
just
laughing.
Just in a silly, goofy mood, and he got ejected for that?
He just giggling on the bench, he got ejected.
I would have to say Texas versus Oklahoma State. The ref bumping into Charlie Strong and then flagging Charlie Strong for that. 15 yards for him walking into Charlie Strong.
I remember exactly what you're talking about. Worst thing I've ever seen. That whole game was a joke. Clark?
Does a coin toss count as a call with Mike Lockett, Thanksgiving Day, the Steelers, and the Lions, where there was confusion? It was an overtime game, and they had the coin tossed, and Jerome Bettis, I can't remember if he said heads or tails, but it sounded like he said one thing, and Lockett, I think it was Lockett was his name, he flipped up the coin and landed, and it was the particular thing that Bettis called, but they gave the ball to the Lions, and the Lions ended up winning the game against the Steelers. That's a pretty bad call. I don't know if it counts as an in-game call, but that's pretty atrocious.
Matt, I'm thinking I want to give you the points because it's so personal. Clark, because it's outside the box and outside the confines of the official game. So you guys are actually both getting the 2 on this one. It's all going to come down to this third question, which I assume we have time for because I'm not seeing John do a little dance. It's official. The Staples Center, home of the Los Angeles Lakers and to a lesser extent the Los Angeles Clippers, will be undergoing its first name change of the millennium, replacing one corporate sponsor for another. Now it'll be referred to as, get this, the Crypto.com Arena. It sounds like the name of a low-level college bowl game. Fans across the country have not received the news well, and frankly, it's not that Staples was a cool name or anything. It's more so that the replacement is even lamer. With that said, panelists, give me your best alternative moniker that the venue could have gone by instead.
Easy. TSTV Sports Arena.
In LA? Okay, I like it. I like the moxie.
The Mamba Center.
Ooh.
Because it's going to be the Lakers soon, so it's not going to have the Clippers in there anymore. So I feel like changing it to just a Kobe or LA themed stadium would be cool.
I like that. With knowing the Clippers will be gone soon, I think the Mamba Center actually works really well. Clark?
If you you could change it to the Magic Center, but the problem is there's a team called the Magic, and Zach stole the Kobe idea. So hang on, let me get some. Hey, no, it was a great answer, bro. I'm not trying to bash on you. That's an awesome answer. I really appreciate it. But great Lakers players.
Clark, we got 5. We've got 4. For the win, Clark. 3.
No.
1.
LeBron Center.
Tough call, but Matt gets the win for coming up with an answer. Matt, you're tonight's winner. Congratulations. That being said, we do not have time for FaceTime. So, congrats to everyone and all of our panelists, and thank you all for tuning in to tonight's episode of College Crossfire. Don't forget to follow us on social media at TSTV Sports on Twitter and Instagram. Lastly, be sure to wake up with the 1-0 Sports Show Friday mornings at 10 a.m. For all of us and the panelists and everyone in the studio, I'm Drew Jacob. Have a wonderful evening.